one. Hello and welcome. Part of the learning process here at the EX APAC conference is having experts share their practical experience with new strategies and new business landscapes. For this session, we are very pleased to have with us Roman Matla, Director of Diversity and Employee Engagement at Google for the Asia Pacific. Roman has over 17 years of experience in diversity, equity, and inclusion programs in the APAC region, and will be sharing with us today how Google designs and sustains a cohesive culture in the workplace, and how leaders can help to drive this initiative across their organizations. Please welcome onto the virtual stage, Roman Matla.
Oh, thank you so much. And let me just start with a huge thanks to everybody at People Matters. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you're dialing in from. As Rachel said, I'm Roman Matla, and my preferred pronouns are he and him. I am the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Google, based here in Singapore. And it is such an honor and a pleasure to be here today at People Matters EX APAC. And while I wish we could all be here in person, let me just take a moment and hope that everyone that's dialing in is doing everything that they can to stay healthy and well, because honestly, there's nothing more important at this point. So the work, or rather the passion that I get to engage in on a daily basis means that my team and I strive to localize our global diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy to make it work for over a dozen markets across our region. So today, I'd like to share with you a little bit about how brands and organizations that cultivate a culture of diversity, inclusion, and a true sense of belonging can be more competitive. And then I'll share some ideas for you to consider as you weigh in on your own DEI strategies. So as a company, we're working to build a lasting culture of inclusion and belonging so that all Google employees feel seen, feel connected, and feel supported and proud to be here. We've learned that focusing on inclusion and co-creating with colleagues from all backgrounds actually makes our products and services more helpful to our global community of users. Let me give you an example. Accessible places, that was an update to our Google Maps product. And it was an update where we actually mapped out wheelchair accessible places. We had over 500 million contributions to that update. Or recognizing that our device cameras were performing poorly for people with darker skin actually led us to improve our device cameras, which benefits everyone regardless of your skin tone. And like many of you, we're doing all of this in the face of unimagined challenges that have had a profound impact on how we all work and how we all live. Those already facing social and economic disadvantages were hit disproportionately hard by COVID-19. And at the same time, we saw violence and racist attacks against Asian, Black, Latinx, and other communities, which forced the world to reckon with its historic injustices. These issues deeply impacted us all at Google and around the world, serving as a reminder that systemic barriers still hold back diverse talent. Every enterprise will approach this differently. So I thought I'd share some of the principles that guide our approach at Google and hope that this might help influence your own organization's DEI commitments. So we have 7 principles that I'll talk you through, and then I'll dive a little bit deeper into numbers 3, 4, and 5. So number 1, we start with transparency. As many of you might have seen already, we launched our diversity annual report, or what we call the DAR, and it's the largest publicly available diversity data set in our industry. It's how we take concrete actions to steadily grow a more representative workforce and show how we've progressed. And it shows us areas that we need to improve on. And this year, our data set was made available so that researchers and industry groups can leverage that data so we can progress as an industry. Number two, use that data to inform your decisions. So data is a critical catalyst for change and an indicator of progress. So it should inform everything that we do. Approach diversity, equity, and inclusion as a business challenge. We set clear goals and OKRs, or objectives and key results, that are aligned with what we want to achieve. Next, it's got to be a shared responsibility, starting with leadership. DEI has to be shared by everyone, and it's not a program. It has to be part of the way you simply do business. Embed diversity, equity, and inclusion as part of your culture. So our culture is shaped by our values and how we conduct ourselves in the pursuit of our mission. Next, think globally, but act locally. So as we continue to grow at Google, we have a responsibility to focus on DEI across all of the countries and cities and sites that we all call home. And lastly, it's a marathon. Actually, it's more like an ultra marathon. We have to understand and accept that real change will come in 10, 15, or 20-year horizons. And as much as that sounds, pretty poor, we've got to plan and invest accordingly. So let me drill down a little bit more. So approaching diversity as a business challenge. At Google, we approach DEI as we approach any other business challenge. We take exactly the same steps. We set clear goals and OKRs that are aligned with what we want to achieve. And we set up a dedicated team with experts and the right level of resourcing. We put together an action plan with clear initiatives, timelines, and owners. We review the progress regularly with our leadership, and then we track those metrics and make reporting available to our leaders. The second one that I want to drill down on, again, is this notion of shared responsibility, and it's got to start with leadership. So DEI has to be shared by everyone, right? And it starts with leadership, as I mentioned. So frontline managers are especially important. They have a huge responsibility as they are the face of Google to their teams, and they have the most direct impact on Googlers' daily experience. And finally, everybody can be an ally and play a role. And I'll talk about allyship a little bit more later on. On leadership, as progress has accelerated, so too have the efforts of Google's leaders to achieve a company-wide goal of fostering a representative and inclusive workplace for everyone. For instance, we formed a DEI council in the APAC region late last year to address the representation gap and ensure that leaders are committed to action to reach our goals. And we use all these opportunities to show up and talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, whether it's at all hands meetings or fireside chats or business reviews or offsites. And we encourage everyone to get involved and take action. Google values inclusion as a way to leverage the diversity of backgrounds and perspective of Googlers to strengthen our culture, to create better products, and to grow our business ultimately. And then lastly, embedding diversity, equity, and inclusion as part of your culture. At Google, we do measure culture. In fact, we measure almost everything. And we rely on internal and external indices to help us understand how Googlers across different lines are experiencing Google. So DEI is a strong pillar of our culture. So we have included it in our values. Our values are how we conduct ourselves in the pursuit of our mission. And they're not to be led by some and followed by others. They're to be owned personally by each of us and collectively by all of us. They are at the heart a balance of trust extended and responsibility accepted. And we call these the three respects: respect the user, respect the opportunity, and respect each other. Employee resource groups, or ERGs, are also an important part of our culture. They provide additional support and communities for underrepresented employees and their allies. Collectively, more than 6,200 employees have participated as members of our 10 employee resource groups across APAC. That's almost 32% of all Googlers in APAC being directly engaged in our DEI work. These Googler-initiated networks are passionate about promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion across the company. Now, what I'd like to say, in fact, I'd love to say, that these 7 areas are the magic potion, the silver bullets to success, but you have to try and iterate, almost like a software developer or like an engineer. As you look to influence the DEI strategies within your own organizations, a reminder of the areas we covered. Approach DEI as a business challenge. Accountability belongs to everyone, but it begins with leadership, and embedding DEI in your culture should reflect your values and what's truly important to your organization. Thank you.
Thank you, Roman, for that in-depth presentation on building culture in a hybrid workforce and how the values of diversity, equity, and inclusion are integrated into the Google culture. I hope our friends have taken away many learnings from this session. Next up on Main Track 2, we have a masterclass on redesigning the employee experience. So we'll see you there.